Welcome to Empowered, Mind-Body Inspiration. The mind is the map to wholeness, wellness, health. The heart is the key to genius and inspiration. Join me and my guests as we explore how to release and rewire into who you truly are, unique, whole, and empowered. Please like, share, and subscribe. Spiral up, spiral out. Welcome, everyone. Today we have Dr. Roseanne Capanna Hodge, an integrative and pediatric mental health expert who is changing the way we view and treat children's mental health. Her work has helped thousands reverse the most challenging conditions: autism, ADHD, anxiety, Lyme, Pandas, and more, using proven holistic therapies. She has been featured on dozens of media outlets and is author of It's Going to Be Okay: Proven Ways to Improve Your Child's Mental Health. Empowering. Let's see how this spirals out. Welcome, Dr. Roseanne.
I'm so excited for this conversation about all things kids' mental health.
Right? And you're such an expert. It's so good to have you on. So let's just start with, a bit of the history and some of the causes that you're seeing. And it's become a bit of an epidemic in itself these days. So yeah, just give us your take on what's happening.
Yeah. So, I have to start with, this is my 30th year in working in mental health with kids and families. It's something I love to do and I'm really passionate about, and I'm deeply concerned. And in January of 2020, right before the pandemic, I started the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health, really as a platform to educate parents about there are solutions for their kids' ADD, focus problems, OCD, whatever's going on with your kid. There are effective science-backed solutions. And guess what? They're natural. So that's what the science tells us. Yeah. Right. How about that? So, and I talk all about it in my book, It's Going to Be Okay. But what's going on? Right. And so first of all, I want to say to parents there and anybody listening, there's no one thing. It is a perfect storm of things coming together at the same time. So why are kids struggling more? Why are parents struggling more, and how to manage behavior or get their kids to pay attention or have good executive functioning? What is going on? So first of all, let's talk about things from the nervous system and the brain and the body, because that's where it all starts, right? So we have chronic stress in our lives, kids and adults. And kids are hit with it in two ways, right? So even right out of the gestational period, when you're carrying your babies, stress impacts how their brain and body develops in utero. Not making you feel bad. I'm just saying this is a factor, right? I really believe there's a way to at least significantly improve things, if not reverse symptoms. So it's just about understanding, and that you have to do deeper work when we understand that root cause. So, and then chronic stress. Our kids are getting bombarded with a lot of tension and stress. Why is that happening? So in general, all kids are more stressed. Kids have lost good social skills. They're not having free play. They're not having downtime to regulate their nervous system, learn how to cope, learn all those things that really help them in life. And then academics. I mean, we're doing developmentally inappropriate academic work. And what does that mean? So it means that 10 to 12 years ago, and I'm also a certified school psychologist. I used to do a lot of neuropsych testing. 10 to 12 years ago, kids in a first grader, what did they do? They wrote maybe a sentence. Okay. But now first graders are expected to write a paragraph or more. And that wouldn't have been expected until third grade. And you're like, well, isn't that good, Roseanne? Well, no, it's not. It's not developmentally appropriate. So when we ask our kids to constantly do developmentally inappropriate work, what does it do? Stresses their nervous system, right? Makes them feel inadequate, makes them feel stupid. You get calls about their handwriting and the quality of their work, but It's not developmentally expected work, but we're pushing our kids in these areas, and we're pushing kids in academics, and we're moving away from teaching them to play, teaching them to problem solve, teaching themselves to know themselves and like themselves. And you say, okay, well, that comes with all that other stuff. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. And, Jayne and I are both the mothers of teenagers. I also have a school age child. And, you can even have seen it in that window of time, right? With your kids, right, Jayne?
Oh, I was shocked by how much they were expected to do in grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know what I found more shocking was if you let your kid actually do their own work, they would get the low marks, which added even extra stress. Whereas there were parents that were at home doing their children's
their work
because it was too much. And
yeah.
I'm like, what is going on?
I had parents doing their kids' religious education work just so they could pass. And I was like, do you really think it's that important? You know what I mean? Like, and they were so stressed about it. And, all that's sitting, right? So we got away from in the 15-year period, when I used to work in schools 20 years ago, kids had 2 recesses a day. Then we're down to 1, and sometimes they're 15 minutes. And, we have to always look to research. So it's like, nerdy, brainy stuff with Dr. Rowe. Okay. So everything I talk about has a lot of research behind it. Adding in for a kid with ADD, right? Adding in 3 30-minute recesses that incorporates moderate exercises reduces the symptoms of ADHD by 40%. Why? Because they're moving their butts and they're getting endorphins in their brain. And there's just so many good things, lymphatic drainage, all this stuff is happening, and it optimizes how their brain works, which means they can pay attention better and they're easy to measure. So we're not doing as much physical activity. We're not doing as much social interaction. We're not doing as much creative learning. And creative learning is where your kids become leaders and not followers, right? And we're really training our kids to be soldiers and to sit down and shut up and do their work. And if you're not a kid who can sit down and, do their work, you're a problem.
Yeah.
So
and it gets diagnosed as a problem.
Get diagnosed as a problem. People would bring their kid to me, and I do QEEG brain maps, Jayne. So people, I work remotely with people all over the world, but I also work in person. And sometimes people fly in, like I have multiple people flying in now that sort of COVID restrictions have lifted from Europe and other parts of the country. But I also do brain checks with people where we do statistical averages. But these cues give me a visual representation of exactly how the brain is functioning. So I could see which region is working or overworking, not working enough or overworking. And I also can see how the brain is talking to itself. You can see the connections or the highways between different sites. It's pretty awesome. So they'll come in and be like, my kid's ADD. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're totally stressed out and they can't pay attention because they're so worried all the time. And so it takes them down a completely different path, the right path. And people often get to me because they, just like you, they thought it was one thing, and then they find really what the real root cause is, right? So when we talk about, what's going on, so developmentally inappropriate, work, not enough exercise, really pushing our kids, high stress. And then we have a lot of genetic mutations happening with our kids, and they are impacting how the brain and body works. They're impacting how you're utilizing nutrients. And we have nutrients that make our brain work. You can't run on Cheetos, people. Okay. And and it doesn't give you anything, Cheetos. You need fat, you need vitamins, you need protein. It doesn't have any, it has fat, the wrong kind of fat. And you have to get, you have to really power up. Our food quality is not the same. It is absolutely impacting how our kids are functioning in the world. And, we have research, it's 10-year-old research now, and it's being redone. But in the States, 54.2% of kids, 1 in 2, have a physical or mental health problem. And it's not uncommon anymore. And our kids are struggling with things like attention or physical issues such as belly aches and eczema and sinus problems and mood problems and anxiety. These are all dramatically on the rise. The average age of onset for somebody with an anxiety disorder is now age 6.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's worrisome.
yeah. So lots of variables. And when we understand what these root causes are, whether it's situational factors like the wrong kind of learning environment, problems understanding what the learning, what learning needs to happen. I'll give a great example of that. Or there's actually problems in how their brain and body is functioning, how it's working. And people have to understand it's not just neurotransmitter difficulties that cause mental health issues or learning problems. That's great marketing from pharma. So it's way more common for you to have chronic long-term stress. And please understand that stress doesn't mean you have to have something bad going on. It's your body's response to your environment. So you can live in a beautiful house, you can send your kid to a great school, they can have great friends, and your kid's nervous system can be agitated and produce difficulties in listening, or your kid may fly off the handle more easily or be impulsive because their nervous system is responding to the stressors in their environment. And then we have inflammation. Right. So poor food quality, stress, all these things create inflammation and infectious diseases. We have a huge rise in infectious diseases, which is leading to not just mental health issues and learning challenges in kids, but adults too.
Right.
Yeah. Lots going on. This is why you got to take care of the brain and body. You really got to, I talk about the 8 pillars that create the foundation for mental health. And I really focus on kids, but it's the same 8 pillars, -1 parenting. We can make that mindset for adults. But there's so much we can do to really restore our cognitive functioning, our attention, and our emotions, our behavioral and emotional functioning. And parents are often so shocked, Jayne, when I'm like, oh, you can do this, this, and this. And they're like, well, why didn't I know about it? And I was actually speaking this past week with a functional doctor who's my client. And she's like, I took him to a therapist. And she was like, you must put this kid on medication. And I was like, you're a functional doctor. She has no training in these other areas. You and I have training in all the areas, and she has only training in one. So that's what she's going to push you towards. She's like, thank you for validating that. And I was like, your kid is so sensitive. You've even had to watch supplements with him. He is a terrible candidate for medication. And she was like, thank you for talking me off the ledge. I was like, we're all on the ledge sometimes, Right.
Yeah, but it does tend to be the first thing that they push because it is all they know what to do. And
they all know what to do. And then on our end as parents, we believe, because this is all we know, that there is a magic bullet, a pill. There's a pill that's going to fix it. And I'm going to tell you, having 30 years of experience in everywhere from psychiatric hospitals to schools, you name it, I've probably worked there, that I rarely saw it work. And in fact, most of the time, what I saw it do was create unbearable side effects.
Yeah.
From everything from psychosis. It's very common for me to see psychosis with the kids I work with. And people are like, what do you mean it's common? I'm like, it's common, so people are so shocked by that.
Yeah. So you're creating a worse condition.
Yeah. And parents they're not doing anything wrong. They're getting guidance from people they think they trust. What I try to say to people is, first of all, hone in on your instinct, right? And we should never reach for psychiatric medications as a first line of defense with anybody, but especially a developing brain. Yeah. You're going to, we know what the research says about psychiatric medications. First of all, things for like ADD. So medications for ADHD, 100% of the time they have a side effect. 100% of the time. I'm sure your doctor didn't tell you that. And they'll tell you that it's minor. But you can have, and I personally have witnessed dozens of times, kids having psychosis, real dramatic changes in personality, flat. I've seen in front of my face, people have seizures from psychiatric medications. And so we have to stop thinking these things are safe. Every single one of them has warnings on them because there is 100% of the time a toxic effect, and you're not going to know, right? And so you need to start understanding there are other options, and that's what I dive into a lot. All of my work dives into it, but I literally spell it out with 40 pages of research citations in my book. It's going to be okay. But we need parents to start understanding that there are things that can produce dramatic results that are all 100% natural, safe, and who doesn't want that for their kids?
Yeah. I mean, even just letting, say, an 8-year-old boy who often get diagnosed with ADD because they can't sit still and pay attention, just allowing them more freedom to move during the day would probably eliminate a lot of it. But what's happening?
Yeah. I mean, and anecdotally, Jayne, what I would do back in the day, I would, up until a few years ago, I was still doing neuropsych testing. And sometimes a school would hire me because they were forced to hire me. But other times, usually a parent would hire me and I would go in and observe. And when I would do the observations, that's exactly what I would say. I would say, could you put in a standing desk for this kid? How about making 3 standing desks so that any kid who wants to get up, and then we can normalize it. And then we can teach the other kids, hey, when your brain gets tired, you need to get your butt up and move. And you'll get more attentive. Like, why don't we make the job of the teacher easier? And most of my teachers were like, oh my God, this is such great common sense. Some teachers were like, this is more work for me. And I'm like, but you're correcting this kid all day and you're in a negative loop, but absolutely, let's change our environment. Let's change what we're doing to what we know about the brain. We know stimulates attention and learning, good socialization skills, and we put that in broad spectrum. I tell you what, they're going to need to start thinking about this as these kids are all really returning to school, because kids have lost the structure and routine. And some kids are going to come back agitated because their parents have been agitated, right? So, kids regulate of all ages based on how a parent is regulating. It's called co-regulation. So we've got to take care of ourselves and put our own oxygen mask on for ourselves, but also as a role model for our kids. And then also that they're energetically, whether you want to call it energetically or subconscious, is picking up on all those subtle behavioral cues that when you show when you're stressed.
Yeah. Yeah. When your kid comes home with the D, and like my kids would come home with 2 hours of math homework in grade 3. And I was like, what? Okay. We're doing half an hour.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's it. I'm not
good for you, Jayne. People probably are afraid to set boundaries, but I think that that's okay.
Yeah. Like, it just is common sense that no kid can do 2 hours of math homework after being in school all day. I'm like,
no,
they should be playing. They should be getting that itch
hanging out with other kids, doing fun stuff,
Yeah, totally. So, I always questioned it. And as a naturopathic doctor and a homeopath, I see a lot of ADD and mothers worried about their kid going on, the meds for it. And I just say they're a young 8-year-old boy. They're going to want to move about and they're not going to want to pay attention. So we just have to take a breath and not buy into it quite so much.
And really being intentful about the type of movement they do is really a wonderful strategy. And again, there's a lot of science behind not just ADD symptoms, but anxiety and depression with movement. and, if we really are conscientious about it, our kids can do better. And of course, there's homeopathy and supplements. And I've been doing homeopathy and supplements for 30 years, and nutrition was always just part of my upbringing as a daughter of Italian immigrants. And, just common sense says, as adults, when we eat better, we notice a difference in how our brain works, right? So why wouldn't it be the same for your kid? And there's lots of great ways to do it. And I know people, it's probably the same for you, Jayne, like we traveled a lot pre-pandemic, and people would always remark at how such phenomenal eaters my kids were. And I'm like, well, first of all, they don't have an option. Like, there ain't no junk in my house. It just doesn't happen. And my kids love super, super tasty food. And I use a lot of spices and herbs, and my food tastes great. Yeah. There's no boiled broccoli in my house. You know what I mean? Like, there's broccoli with garlic and olive oil and, yummy stuff, maybe even some herbs in there. And oh yeah, they would literally be like, what's wrong with this broccoli? If you just put a little salt or something on it, it just wouldn't be their jam. They need it to be next level.
Right. So let's get into some of the major solutions that you suggest. But I remember when mine were, between 0 and 5, I knew and 7, like when they're first programmed, that you're going to have to teach them to like lots of different foods. You're going to have to teach them that exercise is fun. Yeah. And to be a kid and use their imagination. And like, if you don't do it at that time, it's an uphill battle after that.
It's an uphill battle. It's not impossible. And unfortunately, Jayne, when people come to me, they're often in crisis. They're often like, oh my God, it's 11th grade. And we know we won't make it in college. You know how many people come to me in 11th grade? It's not too late. It's harder. Like you said, it just means like it's work. Like, I had a mom today ask me how many sessions of executive functioning coaching he was going to need. And I was like, your kid is 12. He's never paid attention. You have acted as his executive functioning part of his brain. You're not going to do this for less than, 6 months. Like, this is a process. Like, you're going to have to relearn it, and you're going to have to relearn. So it's always possible. Just know it's more work. And, I have a magic wand on my desk for a reason, because I pull it out on every intake and let people know that I don't have a magic wand and that it's a partnered process. So and what does that mean? It doesn't mean sometimes it's doing dramatic things, like tons of people do neurofeedback with me and biofeedback and PMF. That's a major undertaking. It's an easy undertaking, and it's super pleasant and ridiculously effective. But a lot of times it's these small switches, just like you said, Jayne, like when your kids were little, you just integrated it in, and it's just so much easier, right? Like, my teenager is an awesome eater. Like, he doesn't eat junk. Does that mean we don't have sweets and things like that? No, of course he does, but it's just really good quality stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine actually amazed me. They get up and make eggs on avocado and toast. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Because now they're old enough to do it themselves.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. And that's a big thing. I talk about a lot. My kids, they couldn't even walk, and they were preparing food. Like, your kids should take ownership of their food, and they're way more willing to try foods when you get them to prepare it. You got a teenager, you say, hey, guess what? Wednesday night is your night for meal, and you're going to be preparing it.
Yeah. Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
I'm just happy they do breakfast and lunch.
Yeah. I'm just saying, if you have to start somewhere. Yeah. My kids all the time, like, my youngest is very mature. And so he could use a stove independently. So like, he could use at 6 a gas stove independently. We were there, but by the time he was like 8 or 9, he could use it without us being in the room. And he's mature. He's like a 50-year-old is what he is.
It's really cool.
Yeah. So he would be like, hey, I'm making lunch. I'm making soup. In my house, they make things from scratch. So he'd be like, do you want some? this is really good. I'd be like, are you going to put jalapenos in there? Because he likes really spicy stuff. Yes. Okay. If you don't put 7 in there, I'll eat it. Right. He's like, okay. So it's really cool. He's very proud of himself. And I love to hear him say what a good cook he is and things like that. It's great.
Yeah, I made mine. Look, we have horses, and so they were responsible for bringing them in and feeding them and mucking their stalls and everything. So they got a little bit of reprieve on making dinner, but they're, kids aren't perfect. We
No.
At 14, they wanted to get the heck off the farm. They'd have nothing to do with any of that, but they didn't forget it. And now they've outgrown that. Like there's 14 to 16. I call it the witching years. I don't know what's going on in those brains, but if you can pop out at 16 or so, you're going to be
yes.
Right.
Yeah. Boys' brains really start to mature around 15 is when they really start to mature. And so if you have ADD or a developmental disorder, it will be on a delay, but it does start to really happen. I feel like that's when all your good parenting really starts to integrate, right? And some kids are just easier to parent. I mean, let's just be honest. It's their temperament. It's how they listen and respond, Some kids are more sunny in their disposition. Some kids are always a no first. And it just makes it harder, But it's like, don't give up. It will all come together when they're 16.
Yeah. And it does.
It totally does.
So there's hope. So yeah, let's talk about some of the major things that you tell parents are the most important.
I think the first thing that I tell parents, if you have a kid that's struggling and, think about it, more than 50% of the US of a population has kids that are struggling. And, in Europe, they're seeing a dramatic increase in mental health issues and clinical issues. It's no longer just most prevalent here. And in the States, what happens in the States is we live a very high stress lifestyle, and people aren't as connected as they should be socially. We don't have the same time off as other countries. And we do believe a pill can fix it. So prior to the pandemic, 1 in 6 Americans is on a psychiatric medication, adults, 1 in 6. So it's just a way of life and people aren't really trying to change their behavior. So the number one thing I say is believe. So I think that's the biggest uphill battle I have with parents is they don't believe that evidence-based, science-backed natural approaches work. And as soon as you start to doubt it, this supplement, how could magnesium and vitamin D be so important? Because it is. Those are nutrients that help power up a lot of functions in the brain and body. And if you're, it's like, I have to always give an analogy of a car, right? It's like if you have a Maserati and you're putting regular gas in your Maserati, that sucker's not going to work great. It's going to work. It's not going to work great, right? And they're like, well, if I add this and I fix this, no, you got to put the right gas in. That's the problem, right? We maybe have to do some cleanup because you might have damaged some things, but then we got to put the right gas in. It's that same analogy. So believing that it's possible without being on a worry train is the biggest challenge I have with parents, right? And I had a mom ask me this morning, how good is this therapist? How is this person going to work? Is this treatment going to work? And I said, let me tell you something. The only time I don't get anybody better is one reason. It's because of the parent. It's because the parent doesn't believe it and doesn't do the work. And she's like, yeah, but, and I'm like, there is no yeah, but. It's yeah, and I will do the work. So as corny as that is, Jayne, it is truly the biggest limiter in healing for anybody, whether it's yourself believing that you're going to get better. And let me tell you, I've got a kid with Lyme and Pandas. It is hard. It is hard. My kid couldn't be doing better. He's 16 and we're out on the boat a few weeks ago and I see a Bartonella rash on his back. I thought I was going to throw up. I mean, I was like, are you kidding me? I have literally spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, 14 years, like, and that damn, effing Bartonella thing is back on his back, on his back. And I was like, hold on. He's not falling apart. I'm going to address it. I'm going to go back to what works. Get off the damn worry train. You're going to be okay. You know what I mean? So, and I said, that's it, and here we are 5 days later, back on treatment. I can already see that the Bartonella, for people who don't know what it is, Bartonella it's a tick-borne infection, largely parasitic, and it's the most known tick-borne infection for psychiatric issues. And it produces a stretch mark like rash, typically on the trunk of a person. So it can be, if somebody's had weight gain or loss, it can be missed. And so it's just very, very, when you see it, you're like, that's Bart. And kids would come to me, young adults, kids, and they would have a long history of psychiatric problems. And I'd say, do you have stretch marks on you? And they would say, yes. And I would go, okay, you've had a wrong diagnosis for 12 years. You have a tick-borne infection. So, and I want to say I'm 100% accurate every single time. So it's not that hard. But anyway, it was hard. You have to believe. So believing, as corny as it is. And then my other big, huge advice is don't helicopter parent your kids. This is a worst trend I have seen in 30 years. We have to teach coping skills, people. Okay? So you are doing the greatest disservice that your kid for their entire life. You are going to give them a lifelong problems with managing stress, getting along with others, and you are going to limit their success. Limit their success, people. What does that mean? They are not going to make as much money, people. Because ultimately, in the end, what do people want? Good grades, and they want their kids to have jobs that make money. And when we can't cope with stress, we are not leaders. We do not stretch ourselves to the areas in all the areas. We limit what we can do. And little tweaks in how we talk to our kids to reinforce their problem solving, to teach them, to actually let them be uncomfortable, to actually let them fail is some of the best learning you could give your kid. Can I get an amen on that? She's shaking her head.
Yes. I mean, and what's helicoptering? I mean, I've had to say to myself so many times, just zip it. Like, you don't have to say it every day. Like, let the kid, come along, and it's selective, right? What you said.
And we've gotten to the point where we don't want our kids to feel discomfort, grief, sadness, upset. We want them to experience those moments with us. So when the big stuff happens, they know what the heck to do, and it doesn't make them fall apart, So that's some of the biggest trends. Kids don't have stress tolerance. And then when you don't have stress tolerance, you don't know how to handle little things or big things, and then we're constantly going in and life preserving them. And, so a lot of my work is teaching those coping skills in those tweaks and how you do it. It was really interesting. I do a podcast with my friend, Dr. Dan. I go on his podcast probably once a month, right? I'm going on tomorrow. And I didn't know this, but the last time that I saw him, I'd been on there like 4 times. He said, Dr. Rowe, want you to know, we implemented what we've been talking about for this 4 months. And let me tell you what happened to my kid with ADD. And I was like, what happened? I don't know this, right? He goes, it's completely changed our parenting relationship. I don't have to yell at him anymore. He doesn't feel shame about himself. And he's doing his work on his own. And he asked me for help. He would have never asked me for help before. Instead, it was friction. And he was like, all I did was make some tweaks based on what you said. And I was like, oh, this is like amazing. I'm so glad. He's like, I really have to thank you. I can't believe the difference in just subtle shifts in how I was getting him to manage his own stress, problem solve on his own, and stop the rescue cycle.
Right.
And he's like, I had to let him fail. We definitely had some D's and F's. And I said, I'm here to help you. I'm not going to figure it out for you. And he was pissed off, the kid. And then he just was like, I can do this. I can swim. Right. And he swam and he was like doing great. And then he just feels so good about himself, the kid, so happy to hear that. Plus I love Dr. Dan. He's one of my favorite people. So,
because what does helicoptering do too? It almost drives them in the opposite direction.
It does drive them the opposite. When we constantly rescue somebody, their subconscious is like, I don't have to do it for myself. Somebody always, I had a fight with the kid on the street and my mom went and rescued me. Oh, I don't have to work that stuff out. Somebody else is going to figure it out for me. We don't get them to think and problem solve. Like, somebody was talking to me this week about how bright their kid is. And I said to her, you're a physician. It does not matter how bright your kid is. If you can't do basic common sense things, your kid will not get anywhere in life. And so a pill isn't going to fix that. You've got to do the work. You've got to do the learning. And she was like, oh my God, thank you for saying that to me. And I thought, here's a really smart person, a physician, and I'm having this conversation. There's no magic, right? And then so much of the relationship is this friction. And I'm not revealing any information. This is the same conversation I have with every single well-meaning parent who wants their kid to be successful. Well, the real key to success is your kid to figure it out with your help, right? Not rescuing, but cueing, reinforcing it, and your kid feeling great about themselves. Because if you're constantly like, you need to do this, you need to do that, it's going to erode your relationship. Your kid's going to say, I'm not capable.
Yeah. And so they've never actually achieved anything. They don't know what that feels like.
No.
And B, they haven't learned how to pick themselves up when they fail, which is
exactly.
like a huge life skill.
Huge life skill,
I find they learn it through sport, like, if they're not going to learn it at school. But again, you have to let them fail. Like, you can't let them just quit.
Well, and a coach is a great example, right? So a coach really gets you, they don't do the work for you. They support you, they reinforce you, but they also say, hey, that sucked, buddy. You didn't do that right. You need to do that. And so it's that same kind of coaching mentality, right? But instead, you got parents doing their religious education homework and doing their kids' homework. So they're afraid of the ramifications, Kudos to you to go in and saying, hey, we're not doing 2 hours of homework a night. It's not happening.
I did it regularly. And I found it just got worse in high school because they pushed 5 years into 4 if you wanted to do upper level. And I was like, nope, not doing that either. We're doing it in 5 years. So, you just have to be willing to let them not be.
Absolutely.
The norm.
And where are you racing them to? You know what I mean? Like, it's just so crazy to me, like,
right. And they want their career figured out in grade 9 or 10. I'm like, I didn't know until maybe halfway through university and still didn't know.
Undeclared was pretty normal when we went to school, it's like, you can let people figure things out. I actually would love for, some countries, kids don't go to college right away. They do a year of service. I wish we did that here. The incessant talk of where are you going to college? Where are you going to college? Is so terrible for kids, because I don't believe everybody should go to college. I think there's trades. I think sometimes people need to do the military. Sometimes you need to do Peace Corps. And I just think if we had a year of service or in the military or some organization, health organization, whatever, that kids would then focus on service. And it would give them breathing room, and it gives them all a chance to mature, because most kids can't handle the social components of college. It's a lot, because they haven't been independent. They've been helicoptered. And then people think, well, they're going to be okay. I'm just going to push them out the door in college. And many kids, 40% of kids leave or flunk out or transfer from the university that they go to.
Yeah.
first year.
Right. Because they're going, wait, I didn't really want to do this. I thought maybe I did. And B,
Yeah.
they don't even have the skills to actually do it on their own. So
No,
yeah, it's like,
no. And then they feel so defeated, and that's really hard.
yeah,
We do so much clinical work on that. They're called failure to launch kids. And, a lot of times there's underlying issues and parents are doing the best. Like no criticism of parents. Like think pandemic parenting, like anybody who made it through this pandemic as a parent needs a Purple Heart. Like it's been hard. And I think also too, it's been the first time that parents really had their eyes on kids in learning environments. And even though it's not their true learning environment, I think some parents for the first time really got to see, oh, the teacher was right in 5th grade that, my kid is a little anxious. My kid doesn't complete his work properly, whatever thing. And they got to, and now they don't know what to do. And I would say my biggest tip is, I've kind of said in different ways, is really to look to the science as to what helps kids' brains, what helps them learn, what helps them, deal with mood and stress. And yes, I'm a big fan of Google, but I've done all the research, and that's what my book, It's Going to Be Okay, is about. It just lays it out for you, and you can choose what works best for you. And it's all explained. And, we have to look at things like supplements, exercise, neurofeedback, specific types of psychotherapy. I'm not a fan of talk therapy. Most kids' brains are too activated, right? So if your brain is hyper stress activated in a sympathetic dominant state, it is not physiologically possible for you to process language and take action. Your brain will not allow it. So we just try to cram in talk therapy, but your frontal lobes are offline. So you're not able to process language in the same way. So we need to do different types of therapies, and there's lots out there. You just have to know what to look for.
right. And neurofeedback is really cool because they can see the way they're thinking on a screen,
Yeah.
and how to focus, right? And then they can repeat it when they need to.
Right. Neurofeedback has been around 50 years. Most people are like, oh, it's a new technology. No, tens of thousands of research studies, over 3,000 peer reviewed. And what does it do? It gives reinforcement to the brain to produce a healthy combination of brainwave, and it creates lasting change in the brain. So you teach your brain how to, for example, if you're unfocused, to be focused. And just like building a muscle, you have to do it over time. So like an average person with ADHD or average with anxiety is typically about 40 sessions. But the way that you rewire your brain, it stays that way. It's pretty incredible. So, there are providers all over the world. I do it remotely because not all neurofeedback is the same, and certainly not the number one determining factor of somebody's neurofeedback is the experience of the person setting your protocols. And so that's why people come to me from all over. I'm super passionate and nerdy and worked with thousands of people. So it's very easy for me to say, here are the issues, here's what's going on in the brain. This is exactly the protocol that's going to work for you. But it's amazing. And I wish more people did it because it's so effective in resolving either clinical issues or things that are irritating you. And in the perfect world, I love when I have a few sort of peak performance people right now who just want to make their brain work better. It's pretty amazing. It's how I was able to write 4 books in 4 months. In the pandemic, like I can process information at an extraordinary rate. And clearly I was smart. I got my doctorate a year early. Like I, shaved off a year of my doctoral program, but not like this. This is like what it does is it makes you have an incredible amount of neural connections. And that's what Einstein had in his brain. He had 400 times the amount of neural connections that a normal brain does, and neurofeedback. So sometimes people come to me for the clinical issue, and then they're like, can you take me to the next level? And I'm like, oh yeah, like it's pretty cool stuff. So I don't change personalities, and people are so afraid of neurofeedback. And I'm like, but you want to take Xanax. Like, I don't get it, like
Yeah. And
it just
really,
optimizes what you have. That's it.
yeah.
No harm.
Yeah. I mean, top athletes do it because it teaches them how to regulate their stress
Yes.
and where they should be in the zone and how to
Yep.
achieve that, like under stress, and bring it back when they are stressed, or, it's a muscle, like you say. It's brilliant.
A muscle. There's even a college in Canada that's a school for musicians. It's part of their program that everybody does neurofeedback. Pretty cool, because it lets you get to that higher level of consciousness. It's hard to explain. It's sort of like long-term meditators. You can get to this higher level of consciousness. It's the same thing with neurofeedback.
Yeah. And I think you get there quicker because you can see the result, right?
Yeah.
When you're on
really
track.
tapping into the subconscious. And most people don't realize how much the subconscious is running the show. That's why talk therapy is so slow. Talk therapy is great when your nervous system is regulated and you have an awareness of the issue, but you're literally are wasting your time when you don't have a regulated nervous system. And that's too bad, because it can be such an effective tool. I always say it's the lighting of the candles. That's what therapy is. You don't put the candles on first and then make your cake. So we do that all the time in mental health. Like, we have to get to the bottom pieces and make the nervous system regulated.
Yeah. That's why I love homeopathy, is it gets to the unconscious that's running the show, right?
I love homeopathy. I carry it with me wherever I go.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And I love cell salts. Like when you talked about magnesium, they are the toner for the nervous system. So like most kids can really benefit from mag phos.
And there's, what's great about homeopathy and cell salts is that, again, very low risk, very safe, but yet there's subtle ways is very powerful in how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just writing a book on the 12 cell salts and
cool.
17 acute remedies. So I'll just give that a little plug, because I find people can use them and they do no harm. So it's something that is really empowering.
Absolutely.
So have we covered the big things? I felt like you kind of included a lot of things.
We did cover a lot of big things.
Anything left that we've missed that's super important?
I mean, I would just say, that I always say I really emphasize belief, and I just can't minimize how important that is, and really taking time to regulate the nervous system, whether you do breath work or yoga or prayer or meditation. All you need is a minimum of 10 minutes. And everybody should incorporate that into their lives. It's like probably my biggest tip across the planet of all ages. And, when you are not stressed and your kids are not stressed, and again, know that stress can be perceived, it can be real, it can be imagined, and it can be the people around your kid being stressed in the classroom, whatever's going on. And you can see it so much in this pandemic, like it's pretty clear, like, oh yeah, I can see the world being stressed. We've got to do our part and take care of ourselves, and we have to help our kids take care of ourselves. I can't say that enough. It's the biggest missing piece out of everything across the globe right now.
Yeah. I mean, if in our schools, instead of pushing a drug, we did neurofeedback, meditation, deep breathing, and more exercise, it would probably be incredible, the change.
Yeah. Throw some really good nutrient dense food in there. Bam.
Right. Bam. Thank you, Hunt. So we didn't even get into autism, and that's an earlier diagnosis, but maybe we should do that in another episode.
I'd love to talk about autism in a whole other conversation.
Okay. And so let's do that. And just tell everyone where they could get your book, because I think that would be so helpful for so many to have that.
So my book, It's Going to Be Okay, which I named it that because it's the first thing I tell all the parents I work with, because they need to hear that, because we're only as happy as our happiest kid, right? And worry is when your kid is struggling, you're going to worry. And I always say it's going to be okay because there's solutions, right? And I'm known as the solution finder. So you can go to itsgonnabeokay.com. You can get the book there and you get free gifts. or you can go to Amazon and get it there. And then you can find me, Dr. Roseann, DrRoseann, everywhere.com, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. You can find me as Dr. Roseann.
Perfect. And I'm going to put those links in the show notes so they're easy to find. Thank you so much, Dr. Roseann. It was such a pleasure.
Such a pleasure. I always love talking to people that are, supporting people in such safe and natural ways that really work.
Thank you. Yeah, just to empower, we feel so out of control when we have all the knowledge that we need. Just look for it.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And for everyone out there, don't forget, don't give away your power to anyone else. Be the creator of your own life. Spiral up, spiral out.